Well, hello, hello, hello. Much love to you all. May God bless you all. Hit that like button, share this out. We are going to continue this Lost Wisdom series with the ancient world of wisdom. And a quote from Rolf P. Neerum from a book called The Task of Old Testament Theology. He says Israel's fearless and trustful attitude toward the world was possible only on the basis of its trust in Yahweh. Without this trust, Israel would only have had the defied world as the basis of its experience with reality, and it would have been forced to feel insecure in it and fear it. Israel trusts in Yahweh and not the world order. We should not underestimate the high degree of the hermeneutical sophistication of the text, such as Psalm 104, Psalm 148, Genesis 1, and many others. These texts portray the presence of the universal world order in the daily lives of the creatures. End quote. So, wisdom is the collection of learning we build from our experience in the world. In the modern West, children learn about the danger of busy traffics, hot stoves, the importance of obeying your parents, and the joy of their birthday parties. Adults learn the ways of married life, how to succeed at work, how to cook, clean, find a shortcut in rush hour traffic, and manage complicated financial world that we live in. But as the basic of these things are, it is also important to recognize the great complexity of such learning. See, wisdom is complex and nothing else because of the great length and seemingly randomness of events in daily life. And it is vulnerable both because of our limited experience and because of the forces of sin and evil within us and around us. Clouds don't always mean rain. The stove may not always be hot, especially if it's not been turned on. See, one person's generosity may encourage greedy manipulations from another, sadly. Telling the truth may get you in trouble, sadly. By its very nature, therefore, the wisdom of experience is pliable. It requires us to refine our understanding and to adapt our knowledge to each new person and circumstance that we face throughout our daily lives. So let's look at the ancient versus modern worldviews. We first have to recognize how differently we have come to think and live when compared to ancient cultures back then. In our Western post industrial context, we interpret human experiences primarily through the authority of the scientific mind, and we are assured that our neutral and objective observations will give us truth about the world we live in. And honestly, that is not how we are going to make it with a sterile view of the world with its critical lenses and through um social and scientific concepts. Really, when we look at things like this, we miss out on the spiritual, and the spiritual seems increasingly out of touch with reality. The ancients back then, however, viewed human life in the world as a personal, holistic, and non scientific relationship with nature. To have a dream of a dead relative was not a subconscious experience of the mind, but it was a real part of relating to the human experiences of life and death, where our modern science theorizes this about the meaning of space and time. The ancient world sought the meaning in a mythical and poetic images of nature with its life, death, and seasons. All right, so the God King creation wisdom nexus is what I'm going to talk about here. And the ancient wisdom's holistic and personal view of the world thus allowed for a unique understanding of the order and structure of the world. They believed in wisdom rather than science. And that was the key to unlocking and living structure and order
in creation. The key to a well lived life was a well developed sense of wisdom. This diagram here, this triangle, you had God slash kings on the top, people on the left corner, creation order on the right corner, and wisdom and justice were in the middle of this triangle. So, for most of us, God, kings, creation, and wisdom do not belong in the same phrase, let alone the same sentence. God belongs to worship, the kings to politics, creation to theology, and or Christian science, you could say, and wisdom to ethics or practical life. But that signals the radical shifts that have taken place in the Western culture. In the ancient Near East world, these four concepts were woven together into a single fabric. So their writings are infused with symbolic images of reality. So the ancient Near East, on the other hand, has a preference for concepts which are in themselves concrete, but which frequently signify a reality far larger than their concrete meaning. So, for the example, heaven and earth, water, sea, hills, and depths um, are all concrete symbols that imagine the powerful political, religious, and philosophical realities of the ancient worlds. So kings were usually given a divine status as political and religious representatives of the gods on the earth. A king's job was to apply wisdom against the forces of chaos and thus preserve the harmony and order of the human world. So let's look at the Egyptian worldviews. We know of Egypt's powerful stature in the ancient world not only because of the vast riches of the modern historical discoveries like the pyramids and mummies, but also because of the way that the Old Testament tells us about the influence it had on Israel. From stories of Abraham and Joseph and the prophecies in Jeremiah, it is clear that the Israelites were constantly influenced by this commanding presence to her south. And Egypt had a strong tie between the natural and religious world order. Egypt's three major kingdoms spanned over 2,000 years from 2,800 to 100 BC, amassing a whole range of religious and political views. The result is that many of her myths, laws, poetry, and history contradict one another. Still, we can identify some of the fundamental ways that the Egyptians understood wisdom. Uh, The many and varying creation stories in Egypt generally review creation as coming from Nu, spelled N-U, or sometimes they would pronounce it like Nun, N-U-N, um, about the primordial waters. There is also the story of self creation, as the stories were Atum and Ra created the world. And, most scholars agree that the details of creation were not that important to the Egyptians, unlike we know what the Bible tells us about creation, where there's a really big emphasis and importance on it. Egypt was not merely as concerned with the creation event as it was with maintaining harmony and order within the creation in the present time they lived in. So, we see images we find in the creation account in Genesis, but also in Job, Proverbs, the book of Psalm, which frequently appeal to the waters, the sun, the moon, and the stars as ways to relate to wisdom, knowledge, justice, chaos, death, and lament. Biblical wisdom, as we will see throughout this study, is a gift from the Creator and can only be acquired through humility and reverence. Proverbs 1:7. The beginning of wisdom is the fear of the Lord. So here we must take careful note of what the king, or AKA Pharaoh, as the Egyptian god of the created order. They would, of course, put pharaohs really high up. And we see that Egypt's belief in a king, like a kind of a king god creation order nexus, as we showed that little triangular diagram just a little bit ago on the screen. We see it cannot be overstated that the Nile River was the central feature in Egypt's understanding of life and order. The Nile River was very key to how they looked at understanding of life. As the sole source of life in a vast desert, it determined the Pharaoh's strength, it revealed the favor of the gods, it explained the life of the sun in each new day, and it explained the tendency to see the world through a symmetric balance between water and desert. So when so take this into consideration. When Israel's God, the one true God, Yahweh Jehovah, came to deliver his people from Pharaoh's rings, the battle was quite appropriately carried out in the context of Ma'at. And of course, this is an ancient Egyptian goddess who embodies truth, justice, balance, and cosmic order, playing a crucial role in maintaining harmony in the universe. There's some context writing that they have written uh, in Egypt about this account. In the plagues, Yahweh declared his authority over the snakes, the rivers, the animals, and the mighty waters of the sea. As creation brought death to Egypt, it also brought life to Israel from Exodus 5 through 12. So the first curse we see, the Nile River turns the blood. To the drowning of Pharaoh in the Red Sea, redemption from Egypt was distinctively claimed by Yahweh to be the true owner of creation and its only ruler and its only source of life and renewal. So now that we understand why the Egyptians held such a huge account to the Nile River in particular to show them the balance of life and all this, this is why God had showed his authority over it to know, I'm going to turn this red. And if anyone has listened to what was being said here, the Egyptians, of course, from their wisdom that they believed in, would have definitely showed they did not have favor of their gods. So let's look at some of Egyptian writings and how we can compare this to the wisdom of the Bible. So it is told to us Egypt produced more wisdom writings than perhaps any other ancient Near Eastern culture. The Egyptians developed schools, they often attached them to their temples, whose main purpose was to produce full scale manuals of behavior in collections known as instruction or teachings. So, like Israel's wisdom, Egyptian wisdom was grounded in creation, tied to the king, and handed down through the family and traditions. I mean, look here in Proverbs 1 through 7. The Proverbs of Solomon, the son of David, king of Israel, to know wisdom and instruction, to receive the words of understanding, to receive the instruction of wisdom, justice and judgment and equity, to give subtlety to the simple, to the young man, knowledge and discretion. A wise man will hear and will increase learning, and a man of understanding shall obtain unto wise counsel. To understand a proverb and the interpretation, the words of the wise and their dark sayings. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. So we get some writings, and we'll show a picture of him up here from uh, in Egypt of Amenhotep, which he has a writing where he says, do not carry off the landmark at the boundaries of the arable land, nor disturb the position of the measuring cord, nor be greedy after a cubit of land, nor encroach upon the boundaries of a widow. We see pretty similar here in the book of Proverbs if we go to chapter 22, verse 28, where it says, remove not the ancient landmark which thy fathers have set. Let's go to the next chapter and let's go to verse 10, where it says, remove not the old landmark and enter not into the fields of the fatherless. Pretty similar to some of the ancient writings of wisdom that the Egyptians had, that we see in the wisdom literature of the Bible. Just a few different wordings, but it's about not removing ancient landmarks. There's also another one that he has that says, do not eat bread before a noble, nor lay on thy mouth at first, if thou art satisfied with false chewings. They are a pastime for thy spittle. Look at the cup which is set before thee, and let it serve thy needs. So, here in the same book of Proverbs, chapter 23, we can see similar thing being mentioned in 1 through 3, where it says, when thou sittest to eat with a ruler, consider diligently what is before thee. Put a knife to thy throat, If thou be a man given to appetite, be not desirous of his dainties, for they are deceitful meat. So you might ask, why is it kind of similar, the Egyptian writing, to some of the wisdom literature we find in the Bible? After all, Israel continuously wanted to return to Egypt. So, of course, we reach them in a way. We apply the wisdom they know, but apply it to the wisdom of God to show what truly God does desire. Now, look, the Egyptians' wisdom developed from a pragmatic rules and through the disillusionment of some Middle Kingdom teaching to moral behavior and divine, which we see written in some of the writings of Amenhotep. And we see while the Israelites' wisdom developed too, Yahweh's sovereign rule over creation provides for a unique form of wisdom that is much different than the wisdom that surrounds them. Egyptian wisdom writings resemble the, um, as we can say, the autobiographical form of instruction that we find in the book of Ecclesiastes, where you see there's examples of instructions of a king and instructions of a prince. And we see similar things throughout the book of not only Ecclesiastes, but the book of Proverbs as well. So, as we looked at the Egyptian worldview and Egyptian writings, we're going to look at the Mesopotamia worldviews and Mesopotamia writings. The strong relationship between the God King creation, houses, and wisdom is also evident through ancient Mesopotamia. Remember the diagram we showed in the beginning of this. Like Egypt, Mesopotamia did not have a single creation myth, nor does it seem to have an empathetic concern with the details of creation. We know the Bible is definitely has details with creation and tells us about Yahweh, who is the one true God that created everything. See, the general sense of the universe lied within Mesopotamia's three major gods that came out of the chaos. Anu, which is the most supreme and god of the sky. Enlil is the god of storm, and Enki is the god of water and creation. I've read these ancient tablets from these, and they're like it says, they came out of creation, and this brought these creation myths that they believed in Mesopotamia. It's pure chaos. It has no sense of structure, unlike the Bible gives us a sense of structure. So the Enmuna Elish is the Babylonian creation story, and the Gilgamesh epic are the well known myths distinctive for their impulsive sexuality and violent battles that, um, talk about the creation of the rest of the universe. In this way, it is helpful for us to understand that Mesopotamia viewed the universe through an integration of wills. The gods represented the social forces from which these wills would emerge. A text from Esarhaddon's Chronicle tells us that exemplifies things what we're talking about here. In his chronicle, it says, "The house I built, I completed. With splendor I filled it. I built and completed it for my life, for length of days, for the stability of my reign, for the welfare of my posterity, for the safety of my priestly throne, for the overthrow of my enemies, for the success of the harvest of Assyria, and for the welfare of Assyria. I built it." So note the phrase "I built it." It's very key to talk about this because King um, Esarhaddon established his status as a ruler who makes wise use of the creative order. Many scholars have identified that there seems to be some imagery close to Genesis 1. Genesis 1, day one, um, through the three build the skies, the water, and the earth, while days 4 through 6 fill each of these in the sequence. Two passages from the book of Proverbs also demonstrate the importance of the understanding of the relationship between creation, house provision, and wisdom. And we get this from Proverbs 3:19 through 20, where it reads, "The Lord by wisdom hath founded the earth, by understanding hath he established the heavens. By his knowledge the depths are broken up, and the clouds drop down the dew." Now we're also now going to go to Proverbs 24, which is another section, verse 3 through 4. "Through wisdom is an house builded, and by understanding it is established, and by knowledge shall the chambers be filled with all precious and pleasant riches." So, like Mesopotamia's worldview, the Israelite theology understood wisdom as a common necessity for God and his creatures. God built his world with wisdom, and humans live in that world. We build houses, and through the wisdom that God gives. Yahweh is the true creator of the world, and only by fearing and obeying him do we find the path to true wisdom. So we're going to talk about Mesopotamia's writings, and just like Egypt, they date to as early as 2700 BC. They had wisdom and poetic writings from many people that were parallel to stories like Noah. They had this one Ahikar from the 6th century BC, who delivered a number of counsels and sayings to a very similar that are very similar to the Proverbs. He also praises heavenly wisdom writings to the parallel of parts of Job, Psalm, and Proverbs 8. Pretty similar, but there is some difference, of course. And then you have the Theodicy. Theodicies are texts that seek to vindicate the goodness of God in the face of evil and injustice. Many of the Mesopotamian Theodicies resemble the book of Job. And there's one about this story called The Worm and the Toothache, where this man and his God is a Sumerian variation of the book of Job, of course, but it has a lot of stories that are about the suffering that someone's going through. And then you have the Babylonian Theodicy, that it is a poem between a man and his friend that also resembles dialogues between Job and his comforters from Job 3 through 37. And then the Mesopotamia poetry is really similar to the Egyptian poetry. There are many Samaritan and Akkadian hymns and prayers. These include praises of gods and creation, lamentations, and psalms. The language and the images in these ancient writings are evident in Egypt and in Israel's poetic works. In all of these cultures, political, creational, social images dominate their way of thinking and writing about the world. Cosmic battles, kingship, lament, theodicy, things about the cosmos, redemption, wisdom, and order. And it is also significant that the mountain or the hilltop was often considered the origin of creation and the dwelling places of God. And their writings, even though they're not the same as the Bible does have similarity with the dwelling place of God, like Mount Sinai or Zion in the Old Testament, for instance. Legal writings that they had were pretty similar to Egypt in the sense of justice and equilibrium in the individual's life, and as well as the divinity of Pharaoh. Um, with these legal codes and everything they had. The Mesopotamian region, however, had an unpredictable climate paired with the instability at its national border. The constant sense of chaos in life encouraged them to write many laws and codes and treaties. This is important in that it demonstrates the way kings use their wisdom to enact and enforce laws. And actually, in the other series we're doing, Bible times in world history, we'll probably touch in with some of these laws and codes. So it's almost like these two series can go together. But in the Old Testament, we have this word called peace, which is shalom. And then we also see justice and righteousness, for instance, like Proverbs 1 3. In the minds in the Egypt and Mesopotamia, they linked gods, kings, creation, wisdom, and order all together. Humanity is joined with the gods in nature, and wisdom serves as key both to survival and to flourishing. Through many generations of retelling these stories, these cultures viewed themselves as living within one matrix of life, work, and worship. So now, if we look at wisdom and worldview that was taking place with the Hebrews in the land of Israel, we'll see that the Israelites' relationship um, with their Egyptian and Mesopotamian neighbors is undisputable. I mean, we see it throughout there that many times they want to return to Egypt. They were told to get rid of all these people from a land, but they didn't, and they ended up intermingling. We see that they traveled with them, they lived with them, they fought with them, they hosted them, and traded their economic goods with them. They studied in one another's schools and heard one another's stories. In other words, while Israel's poetic and wisdom writings look very much like those of their neighbors, the place where they differ are really important. As we see that there's this unique transformation of these ancient forms of literature that highlights the distinctiveness of the theology of the Bible, the religion of the Bible, the worldview and politics and ethics that the Bible teaches us. We see that Yahweh, Jehovah, we see that the wisdom he teaches in the Bible is the fear of Yahweh. Proverbs 1:7, Proverbs 9:10, Job 28:28, Ecclesiastes 12:3. And also, what differs them from it is their monotheism. They believed in one God. As all these other nations, they looked at their wisdom to be in a polytheistic view, that they get wisdom from many gods. But wisdom has a singular origin in a single path. And that path, of course, is through the one true God. See, the Hebrew wisdom is an act of a single God, bringing the world from chaos to order. A lot of these other ones believe that sexuality and all these other things and sacrifications of things that were never mentioned in the Bible will bring created order. But we see that Israel's king is never favorably portrayed as the source of law, wisdom, or of the ultimate authority. Rather, kings and judges are constrained to rule under the wisdom and authority of Yahweh, the true king of Israel. Psalm 72, verse 1 through 2, for instance. But as we look at all these many cultures, how they viewed wisdom and ethnical and religious things, we see, however, the combination of these features helps us to appreciate how they framed the wisdom that the Bible speaks to us about, and the worship that the Bible speaks to us about. And we see that it's very unique, it's very different, and we praise God for this difference. The Old Testament wisdom books set out a frame of a worldview from in one little small nation, one grounded in the theological aspects of Genesis and the law. God intended these creative and highly memorable writings to become a way of life for his people. And still today, as people forget about the wisdom literature. I hope you enjoyed this part. Sorry this one took a little longer to get out than the other ones. We've been relatively busy, but was glad to get this one done and to get it released to you guys so we can continue to get back on the path to true biblical wisdom and be able to define what's right and wrong. All praise, honor, and glory to the Most High God and His Holy Spirit that guides us. Much love, and may God bless you. Hit the like button on the way out.